Hi guys, welcome to the very first podcast for ADHD Ireland, hosted by me, Lauren McBride, or Her Thoughts in Bright Colours on Instagram. I hope we're all well. Over the course of this podcast, we're going to discuss all aspects of ADHD in an honest way, as we have lived with ADHD our whole lives. Some of us were diagnosed sooner than later, and some of us aren't diagnosed formally at all. This gives a wide variety of experiences from all different perspectives. Please listen at your own discretion, as we are coming from a place of personal experiences. Some topics may be sensitive to listeners, so please be advised that our opinions and lives may not directly correlate with your experiences living with ADHD. During these podcasts, people living with ADHD or who have experience with ADHD in their familial, platonic, or romantic relationships will be joining me over Zoom. Thank you to everyone who is and will be involved. We couldn't do it without you. I'm super excited to be hosting this podcast. Thank you to ADHD Ireland for giving me the opportunity to do something that I love. And with that, let's chat. Welcome back to the next episode of Let's Chat ADHD. Today we're going to be discussing a topic called sensory overload. So sensory overload is when any of your senses, or maybe even all five, get overwhelmed by the information they're trying to process in any given moment. The brain then responds to this sense of overwhelm with a response as old as we are: flight, or freeze mode. The feeling we experience as people with ADHD is uncomfortable, and sometimes it may even feel unbearable. We often want to remove ourselves from the situation that we're experiencing or the experience at hand until we feel less immense pressure. This can be a healthy coping mechanism, but may not always be available to us in the moment. Some other coping mechanisms we have learned are deep breathing, progressive muscular relaxation, or even attempting to just stay focused on one aspect of the situation at hand. So sensory overload may present feelings and emotions such as fear, stress, nausea, irritability, restlessness, and panic. Now that we've talked a little bit about this in the introduction, I would appreciate if one of you guys would introduce yourselves and then maybe speak on some of the experiences that you may have with this issue. So if everybody wants to say hi first and then reintroduce yourself when you're talking again.
Great. Hi, it's Austin again. It's funny, you were just talking about different coping mechanisms, and you just listed a whole pile of stuff I've never tried before or even contemplated trying. I only ever just stick on music to try and deal with it.
I get that. I think we all just kind of go into panic mode and we use the coping mechanism that we may have always used. But I guess it's kind of nice that we have like a few listed for listeners. But how do you feel like that works for you, Austin? Is it like a 10 out of 10, or is it just going to take you away from it for a few moments?
It depends on, it's more of even a preventative, to be honest. So something like cooking, if I want to just get on and get it done, I try and kind of clean up after myself as I go, try and do as much as possible. And if I don't have headphones on and I'm not listening to music, I find I get distracted by just all the noise of everything that's going on around me, or the cooking, the all the little things, the pots going off, the extractor fan, the stuff falling on the floor, whatever it is, all those noises, coupled with hearing children next door, doors going, everything. It's just too much to then be able to focus on the task at hand. So I have to have music going on. I have to have headphones.
Okay,
noise cancelling headphones.
Okay, yeah.
So it just blocks everything else out.
Yeah, no, 100%. One of the first questions I was going to ask is actually about common triggers that would set off sensory overload. So it's really interesting to hear that for you, it's cooking, and that's a really hard one to experience because, I mean, for most of us, like cooking would be like a daily activity. So do you find that you'd avoid this because of the reason of sensory overload, or would you still try and push through it every day?
No, it's a weird kind of almost paradox. I love cooking. Like I absolutely love cooking. I love making food. A part of, I guess, the distraction with cooking is if you're getting focused in on making sure that you're not burning something or overcooking something, whatever it might be, or just trying out something new. But it's the trying to get it kind of done kind of quickly, not taking too long or not getting distracted by something else, not picking up my phone to find that kind of dopamine hit from something like Instagram. So instead of doing that, if there's music on, there's nothing else to kind of distract me. It really is a great way to focus.
Yeah.
And it would be the same for a lot of other tasks.
Okay. I think I resonate with something you were saying there, because one of the things that I don't know about you guys, but that you may be explaining there is multitasking. And for me, like one of the biggest ones that would bring on sensory overload is kind of applying myself too much to like various things at once and getting overwhelmed. And something as simple to maybe neurotypical people as cooking, I feel like what you're saying is trying to get everything done at once is definitely an example of multitasking. And I don't know about you, Nelly, but I don't think, from what I've heard, people with ADHD are the best at multitasking without getting overwhelmed.
Hello, everyone. This is Nelly, and I'm really happy to be back here. I was interested in the definition of sensory overload because, and also the idea of triggers going to overwhelm, because the way I describe my sensory overload is a non-logical too muchness. And I think more than the fight, flight, or freeze. Well, I mean, I could describe how that happens in my overwhelm very it's non-logical. There are many triggers, but when I'm in an overwhelm, I could be fighting in that I just burst emotionally. It's part of that emotional dysregulation. And like sort of avoidant behavior, I'd say, more than actually, running away from the scenario. But freeze, that stuckness, and the trying to find some sort of antidote to a way of being overwhelmed is really interesting. And so when it's my turn, I'll sort of, I would love to tell a story from yesterday about this scenario, just keeping it in the moment.
I think go for it. I mean, especially yesterday, because I recognize that, the podcast was meant to be yesterday, guys. And it, like, obviously you're very resilient in that you've learned maybe the coping mechanisms to still be able to apply yourself and still come onto the podcast. But I'd love to know about yesterday. I'd love to hear your story if you're willing to talk about it.
Austin, would you like to go?
That's all right. I was just going to pick up on what you said about the freeze thing, and that is the whole ADHD paralysis comes in many forms, and there are certainly times when even things like music can actually become a disadvantage. You might have music in the background, and then suddenly, like for me, having two really young kids, one of them might throw something on the ground, and they're screaming at the same time, and then the baby's crying, and there's music on at the same time, and you're already trying to focus on whatever it is that it was you went into that room to focus on, and you can't do any of those things. And it's almost like the volume in the atmosphere is just building up and building up, and it's getting louder and louder. It's almost like this kind of, there's this dam that's holding back all your emotions and everything, and the water's kind of about to go over the top, and all it's going to take is a tiny drop, and that's it. The dam's going to burst, and something's going to burst out of you. And so it is very difficult to then not be irritable, and then not get at people, and not shout, not have an emotional outburst, and then like
it's very tough.
Reeling yourself back in from that. Like, it's not like suddenly you've had this emotional outburst and then it's like, great, I'm fine now. There's a whole kind of stepping back from it, apologizing to people for shouting at them because it's actually not really their fault, and then trying to just recenter yourself to focus back in on whatever it is that you are wanting to do. And often that's half the problem. You've walked into that room to do something, you've got distracted by a whole pile of other things, and you just have this feeling of incompleteness from not being able to remember what it is that you wanted to do, whatever it is you wanted to complete. And that's certainly the hardest thing to reconcile with yourself, not completing a task when you've got ADHD, because you are just so desperate to finish something, to get to the end of the day and gone, yep, I've completed these 3-4 tasks. I did it.
Yeah, it can be terrifying. Yeah, I can see all three of these in your scenario. And I just love the opportunity to hear someone's experience that is like showing my insides. That's fantastic. And it may be hard for some listeners to understand like what the personal definition is of sensory overload, because as you were saying, Austin, sometimes it's often threading the needle, finding a kinder narrative about myself. One of my favorite things is how much I dig things, how into things I get, and how interested and excited I am. And so I will often stack many different stimuli and, just try and thread the needle of focus, right? So, but then there could be a conversation with my partner while a podcast is going on, while I'm trying to think of a grocery list, and sometimes that's grand. Sometimes that's the best way of getting a task done, because as you said, forgetting because you're off track, or the feeling of just all of the negative sensations that can come with not completing a task or not getting into that focused space, can be loops of unkindness to myself. And so I will often create a very sensually rich scenario so that I'm like hitting that mark, right? Threading the needle. And so I appreciate that scenario so much and can relate it to many different things. And as I too loved when Lauren said, here are some things that we do. And when I hear the words we do, I go, oh, right, I do that. Maybe not, because part of the ways that my ADHD presents is, am I supposed to feel a certain way? Like I often cede my authority to others. I go, oh, right, you're right, I'm wrong. I must understand that I haven't got all of the tools that are really working, but I'm working on it, right? So I wanted to talk about yesterday because I was very psyched to have this opportunity to talk about emotional overwhelm or sensory overload, or when it's the non-logic of the too muchness that I find fascinating. Because as you had said, Lauren, the idea of here's a trigger, if it were so simple and logical of trigger, response, then I would have hacked this game a long time ago. Like it would have been a really easy thing to understand. But sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, which is a shape of brain problem, perhaps. But yesterday it was, I woke up in a kind of straddling consciousness, like, I don't know, bad place. And in Ireland this summer, I got COVID, and the way that I thought about COVID is with all of the media and all of the existential what do you call it? Circumlocution, all of the ways of just keeping perseverating and thinking about it. All I could hear was, I can't breathe. And so when I did, and so that would be triggered in the anxiety of the COVID times of like things were too dark or my room was too closed up or what have you. And when I actually got COVID, I'm like, there is not enough air in Ireland. Like there's like I would have these ideas of like the heaviness, the leadenness of the air when you had a bit of a a weight on your chest. And so I started to really focus on senses. And so when I woke up yesterday morning, I had this feeling and I couldn't differentiate logically my senses of like where I was, what I was doing, but I had just like, sometimes you wake up terrified, and I woke up terrified. And I went, okay, I have to work my way out of this. And that was the interesting path. Like, that's what I kind of wanted to talk about. It was like, wait, when you're in this mode and it's that freeze or that stuckness, what do you do? Like, I remember another point this summer where I had gone back to the States for 11 days and it was the 32-degree weather. And I was going through a lot of like existential changes and life realities that were upsetting. And it was so hot in my apartment that I took an ice cube and would be rubbing it against my chest. And that take you out of the sensation of everything is too hot and I can't handle, and there's this overwhelm, and just trying to find the antidote. And so yesterday I brushed my teeth, and I thought about how like my sister's an actor and she brushes her teeth before performance. And for a lot of people, brushing your teeth is a reset. And I went, what? I forgot about like, the existence of toothbrushing. When I'm in that overwhelm state, I don't even know what kind of tools there are. And I had burned my hand cooking, and I had this like little bit of like an itching sensation on the burn, and like that became completely like the focus of my reality. And I just I kept perseverating. I kept thinking about these things so hard. And the way that I worked out of it is with this lightness of like, this can pass. But I just started to do alternate sensations, like brushing my teeth or taking a shower or doing cleaning out the wound with hydrogen peroxide, or just something else. And I did it until I didn't feel the way that I had. And that's one of the remarkable things about sensory overload, is it's not going to be my experience forever and ever and ever. And I wanted to talk about it because I was like, wait a second, this is the first time that maybe I had used tools, and and I also took a decongestion. And even if I wasn't actually congested, it's that Dumbo's feather, or that's the placebo effect, is I'm doing all of these things that I know are good things. And that's the way that I'm going to get out of it. And if I believe I'm going to get out of it, if I keep doing good things, I'm going to get out of it. So I wanted to see what other people thought of that, of like a kind of placebo effect, or faking it till you made it, or just like, going and having an ice cube, or having some sort of like absolute sensory detachment. Some people in the ADHD community like stims, or, textures, fabrics, different ways of stacking sensations that get you out of that stuckness.
Okay, because now I'm trying to rack my brain to think if I actually do any of that stuff without even consciously. I'd never, ever contemplated that kind of thing before. How you can do something that's so completely different to physically, sensorially different to what you've been doing. So I just quickly Googled brushing your teeth, mind reset. And there's an article from January on The Independent that says that looking after your teeth also takes care of the brain, experts have found. I don't know if there's just a gap in education or just in the way we communicate as people, but I have never, ever heard anybody talk about doing something, not just kind of taking your mind out of something, like listening to music or staring out of a window, but physically doing an alternate task to what you would normally be doing as a way of resetting your head. Now I'm going to have to take a toothbrush to work. See if that helps, because that's okay. What are the tools did you say that you had? Brushing your teeth, ice cube on your chest. What else was there?
Hot, cold.
Oh, we appear to have lost the host. Well, it's still recording. We're still going.
Yes. So any antidote. If you've ever been at a slumber party, a sleepover, you put somebody's hand in warm water, and they'll do something. They'll have a physiological response. So anything, put your hand in warm water, put your splash water on your face. Try anything that will be stimulating in some other fashion. And we know how to go to overwhelm. So I think we're tenacious enough that we would just keep trying things, right? And it's not going, and as I said about it not being logical, of here's a 0 to overwhelm, and sometimes that works and sometimes that that doesn't work. It's what are the things that I can do? So I can't even give you a list. I bet you have things that would give you a list, like, grab one of your child's toys, grab whatever.
Yeah, I'm
try
just trying to,
try something.
try something. So
That willingness is what gets me out, right? Like,
yeah,
this is going to work, is what I tell myself. This is going to work, and that helps. And that's how ADHD Ireland has helped me. Is I'm like, this is going to work. Assume good intentions. Assume that that there are ways out of this overwhelm.
Sorry, guys,
So-
it kicked me out there. Can you hear me?
yes, yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, you're going to say something. Go on.
Yes. So I was going to say that there's often things, that kind of positive mindset of this is going to work. I think if you don't hear that enough, or don't have that as part of the way that you approach problems that you have with something like sensory overload, it's very, very difficult to get out of. I mean, my default, and it's something that, like, I'm considering getting like what's called a dumb phone, like just a cheap Nokia dumb phone, so that I don't have access to something like Instagram, because it is so unbelievably easy to just, when there's too much going on, just to take 2 minutes, or you say 2 minutes out, start scrolling, get into a particular subject, and then fall down that rabbit hole of, well, let's just find out more about the subject, instead of physically, instead of just being, and that's the thing, it's the being motionless, it's the being sat there and doing something. Whereas if you're getting up to do something, you're physically doing a different task. It's moving your body, it's getting the blood going, it's all those things that will help get you out of that mindset. And that's the thing that I personally really struggle with at the moment. And I periodically, every couple of weeks, delete Instagram off my phone. I still haven't got around to deleting my account. I probably should just do that. But there is things that people don't necessarily take into account with, like, sensory overload, the kind of the many different layers, especially because it's different for different people. Different sounds that are triggering different parts of the environment that you're in. It could be a smell, it could be the temperature of the room is just that extra thing on top. Something that is kind of part of what makes it difficult for me is that I have tinnitus, for those of us that aren't European. So we call it tinnitus over here. And I've had it since I was about 17, 18. And it's just a constant whine. So for those of us that are old enough to remember the old style big fat tube TVs, when you turned it on, there was like a whine, like a really high pitched kind of tone that they made. And that's what I hear all the time. And sometimes it's really pronounced. And if it's quiet, if there's no noise whatsoever, it's like the volume goes up, and it just kind of goes up and up and up. And so I have to have something on. So it's really difficult to find a balance between kind of having a quiet environment and having kind of too much noise in that environment that I've put on myself, like the TV, like music, and even having those different ways of listening to those things, like having a speaker or the TV or headphones. To a certain point, there's, I can only wear headphones for like an hour before there's then the pressure on your head starts to, and then that's another thing that layers up on top. So the tool that I was using to not become overloaded is now starting to contribute to that point of being overloaded. And and like you said about kind of threading that needle, trying to just weave your way through these different things and finding a balance between what works and what's not working, and moving between kind of different scenarios, the different kind of parts of whatever is happening in your day. And you're consciously I think that's the other thing that people who don't have ADHD don't quite appreciate. I am constantly thinking about these things at the time of the thing. If I'm washing up and I've got my headphones on, I'm not just washing up and not just listening to music. I'm also thinking about how loud is the music? Do I like this song? What's going on in the other room? Because I can't hear anything. Do I need to listen to those things? I can feel pressure on my ears. Do I need to buy new headphones? Because would they be more comfortable? Where am I going to start looking for new headphones? And your brain just runs away with itself. So everything you're trying to do to not be overloaded suddenly kind of starts to work against you if it gets to that point where you can physically feel it. And so having those tools to be able to do something different would be really beneficial. Actually, is there something on the ADHD Ireland website that talks about this?
I'm
Well,
assuming so. Nelly, you
Yeah.
probably know best. You attend lots of the.
I do. I do. And actually, an Attitude magazine would probably be a great place to look for it. It's just personally, I've heard people talk about how our default is that drill sergeant of like, oh, we've got to be better at this. Like we've got to have some sort of discipline, because the way that it feels, especially to outsiders when we have ADHD, is that we're lazy or that we're undisciplined. And so we use that drill sergeant. You need to do this. You need to do this. You need to do this. And actually, that kind of thinking is part of our perseveration, that we will like, okay, so when I had this like burn on my pinky, all I could feel is the pinky, like the tunnel. Only world is this over sensation of an itching finger. And it's like, I'm never going to stop itching. It's like, what can I do to get out of it? And so our immediate rigid thinking that we're being neurodivergent in a structure that we don't necessarily understand, is to be really cruel to ourselves about that, and to say, hey, there is something that everybody else knows, and you're just bad that you're thinking about this finger, and like, may your finger fall off, or I don't know, some cruel way of thinking about it. And I know that I am healthier the more flexible I think. And I like to challenge, all of those structures about it. And then I'd be more likely to not fall down the rabbit holes. I actually have a video game on my phone that's kind of problematic. But that's something that I have, just being conscious of can perhaps help me to deal with. I think we all have these idiosyncrasies. However, never being offered these tools of try something else. Oh, that didn't work. Try again. Rather than that didn't work. My ADHD brain is all or nothing. I'm just a bad person. I give up. And that that mode is also a learned behavior of ours, right? So we give up, and we wouldn't work on our work relationships or our human relationships or our relationships to ourselves because it didn't work. So I never know what's going to be too much, right? Like if I start focusing on how my clothing feels or my headphones feel or what have you, that's going to be an off to the races moment anyway, right? Because my brain is so good at seeing some of these details, or what you described, that metacognition, that thinking about and being able to have, I mean, Lauren mentioned it as multitasking, but really it's all of this brain closet. I mean, there's so many compartments to it that who knows what's wheeling around. And I like to think of this, this Walt Whitman quote of be curious rather than judgmental. Like always, if our superpower is our curiosity. And so when something doesn't work, or when something seems like overwhelm, or something seems totally stuck, I really feel that idea of, okay, can I reset? Oh, I don't feel like I can reset. Like seriously, I could have a concrete thought like there is no air in Ireland. That's what the cold damp is. It means that there's no air. And like that's it. And that's terror. And that would be the same experience that anybody would be having anywhere, like, because that's what it is to feel a respiratory illness. But I just get something completely non-logical. And the only way out is a way out. So like, who knows what that is? But apology is an interesting thing that I wanted to ask Austin about. So like you fight, and then can you tell that process a bit? Like you get overstimulated.
And then you have a go at someone because they've gone and asked you to do something that was either distracted you from the thing that you thought you were going to do, or has interrupted your backtracking of, I came to this room for these reasons, I think, and I'm trying to, and then they've asked you something or asked you to do something, or something is kicked off. And it's so difficult not to just snap, because all you want to do is just focus on that one thing. And if you lose that train of thought, that's it. You're never going to get that back. There's no way to just backtrack and suddenly go, oh yeah, it was that, obviously. And what makes it worse is usually your brain throws it up like a week later. You're like, oh, that's what you were thinking about. Oh, I was looking for that thing that I've lost for a long time. I'll go look for it now. And you still don't find it. Is usually the case. Like, I lost my watch. I think my son took my watch. I've lost my watch like 4 or 5 weeks ago, probably longer. And I'm desperate for my watch. Like, I don't know where it is. I've looked for it. He doesn't know where it is. And even something as basic as, like, if part of your routine is knowing the time, and you don't want to touch your phone, because as soon as you look at your phone for the time, I'm going to check my notifications. As soon as I check my notifications, there's something I'm interested in, and then that's it. You're lost again, and all those things build up, and then like you're saying, you're hard on yourself for doing those things. Why did I give in to that again? And then you go, well, I know I gave into it because it's designed for me to be addicted to it. It's designed, and then you think, well, then it's kind of not my fault. Yeah, but you still gave in. You're kind of conscious of all these things about yourself. You're hyper self-aware. And because you haven't given yourself a reset, when you then go into a room which is full of all this noise, that's it. You kind of almost got no hope, really, of not having to go at someone. And so then the apology step is so difficult, because you kind of feel kind of justified as to why you had that emotional outburst, but it wasn't right. And there has to be kind of a reset for everybody. You have to be able to calm down, acknowledge what it is that you've done, take yourself out of that situation, and then come back to it sometime later and apologize for kind of being yourself. But like, I'm aware that I have these outbursts, and I think since being diagnosed and becoming even more aware of those outbursts, it has been, I think they've happened less. They seem to be kind of less and less, because you kind of, you feel when a situation is building up, and it's easier just to walk away. I mean, sometimes it just happens because you're in a high stress situation. You're trying to leave the house. I'm trying to leave the house with 2 kids. It takes half a day. You can plan to be somewhere in the morning, and it takes 2 hours to get everybody out of the house. And then when you miss your alarm, everything just builds up and builds up. And it's that somewhere there has to be a release. You can't just say, sorry, emotions, get lost. Well, hey, I'm not going to have an outburst now. It's like the whole thing of, oh, well, can't you just get up earlier? Or can't you just remember where you put those things? It's like, well, no, I wish I could. I just don't have that mind. It just doesn't work like that.
It's that thing that Nelly said as well about being kinder to yourself, which was, and curiosity and everything that's great about us. In those situations, like you said, there's going to be a build-up, there's going to be a release. And this is one of the problems that, a lot of us may have, and it's absolutely valid to have that. And what you can do then is, of course, apologize when you have those outbursts, but they're going to come unless we're perfect, and we can try and mediate and manage them as much as we can, but it's still going to be painful when it happens, because you're like, that wasn't me, I was overstimulated, I'm sorry. And all you can do is apologize, and then, like Nelly said, be kinder to yourself in the moment. And things that feel worthless or addictive, like being on the phone or those games or anything, they may in the long term be a negative thing, but in the time, there's a reason you're using it. You're taking yourself off. You're doing, like Nelly was talking about with the brushing teeth, the reset. It may not be in the most healthy way, but you are, you know, subconsciously trying your best to do the reset. So like Nelly said, it's really important to be kind to ourselves. And on the topic of, you know, things that we can do to kind of manage this and take our time out or reset, my psychiatrist was talking to me because one of my main issues would definitely be sensory overload, or applying myself to too many things at once, which is either multitasking or just, you know, when I'm in a good headspace, I'm like, oh, this is great. Like Nelly said, I can do this day, but then maybe another day it might be really overwhelming. So I was talking to her about that, and she specializes in ADHD, and she's helped me so much. And one of the things that may not be, you know, a reset in the moment, but somehow works long term. And I know so many people who are listening are probably going to be like, oh my God, but this is our worst enemy. But the resetting can be routine. And I know it is our worst enemy. It's definitely my worst enemy. But the little physical tasks, like, you know, for me this morning, I had sensory overload and it was hoovering, felt so difficult in the moment. But it was, like you said, Austin, moving your body, getting the blood pumping. And I feel like that really helped me. And, you know, you're pushing yourself to do it. You're like, ADHD routine, like, you know, they clash so much, but over time doesn't fix everything. But bringing ourselves back to the physical things that we're doing, like resetting ourselves with routine, somewhat, for me, somewhat now manages the kind of the sensory overload. Now every few weeks or maybe several times a day, I can feel it coming, and it's something I've learned. Like, you know, we were talking about being kinder to ourselves to kind of put up with, because I'm like, okay, I didn't recognize that my head was buzzing. I didn't recognize I could hear the washing machine at the same time as I was on my phone, and the TV was on at the same time, and now I'm really overwhelmed. But it's about learning little bits that make it easier to be kinder to yourself, to kind of recognize, okay, I did try and do my routine today, but I still got overwhelmed, and maybe I was irritable, but I'm going to be kind to myself and forgive myself and say sorry, you know. So I feel like, although Austin, you were saying, oh, there is tools that we can do, there is coping mechanisms. Maybe I didn't know. For me, it's music, but maybe I didn't know that there was other ones. There may be ones that we just don't realize we're actually inputting for ourselves already, because I'm sure, you know, like, we don't feel like we could get out of it at the time at all, but somehow we do. And it's definitely from either physical routine, you know, rituals that we may do before bedtime, things that aren't always going to work, but it kind of keeps us in check a little bit. So I was really grateful to my psychiatrist for kind of pushing me on this. Because sometimes when it's just extremely overwhelming and I'm like, I'm giving up on everything, work, college, you know, everything that's getting too much that I may have over applied myself to, still getting myself to bed most of the time, still getting in the shower a quarter of the time. These like little rituals are coping mechanisms we may not even realize we're doing. But I think, you know, oftentimes it's important to recognize they can't be avoided. Like you were saying, Austin, about your kids, you know, the overwhelm that may come in a situation like that. Or for me, it's my dogs sometimes when they're barking, or I have to bring them out on a walk and I feel like I can't do it. It can't be avoided, but like Nelly said, it's about being really kind to ourselves. Although the little nagging voice in our head is never going to really ease up on that most of the time. But you know, being kinder to ourselves in the moment and trying to maintain even a quarter of the time some sort of a structure. That's just my take on it. Yeah.
Yeah, there is actually something on the ADHD Ireland website. I searched on their site, sensory overload, and there was one article. It's 6 at-home occupational therapy techniques that make a real difference. And obviously, this is aimed at children, but there's quite a lot in there that you could kind of pull out and create things that would help you as an adult, because some of the tasks that it's talking about are kind of a more children centric, like doing your homework. Like, I'm glad I don't have any homework to do now. I hated homework. Why couldn't you do everything in school? One of the last point 6 is use mindfulness to ground the ADHD brain. And actually, something that it's brought up, which kind of I'd never really thought about before, was how to kind of ground yourself in your environment by pointing out, like, by bringing attention to certain aspects of that environment. So it says you can help by asking your child to take a deep breath and then identify a red object in the room, a yellow one, a blue one. It can be any object, I guess. And it kind of grounds you in that environment. So you're bringing that environment back into focus, instead of them focusing on the kind of the stresses that might be there. I will note, and it's nice to see that it's there, occupational therapists don't fix children, we empower them by applying these techniques at home. I think that's something that often you might hear or see around, is that people think that ADHD is just like a thing that can be fixed, as opposed to something that's, you just need a lot of tools in the chest to be able to deal with and cope with and bring out at the appropriate time, and not just, well, you know how to do this now, so surely every other time this comes up, that's it, you can deal with it. And it's like, well, no, that doesn't. And as like a side effect, I suddenly was thinking, a side effect of the sensory overload, I have really good hearing, right? I can hear when someone's phone's buzzing, like the other end of the house. I know when they've got a phone call coming in, but somebody can be talking at my face and I don't hear what they say. And that's something that I think a lot of people think that, oh, well, you've got ADHD, you're just not focusing on what I'm saying. How come you can't hear me? Is there something wrong with your hearing? And it's not that at all. A lot of the time, I hear what somebody is saying, and it's just taking a while for my brain to actually process what it is that they've said. And I've noticed this in my wife quite a lot recently, and I'm even more self-aware that the first time she says something to me, I do hear it, but I go, sorry, what did you just say? Oh, can you say that again? And she says it again. My brain goes, oh yeah, I did hear that the first time. I did. But I'm either so distracted or there's so much else going on. She can be in the same room and she can be speaking to me, and there can be another noise, like my kids playing with loud wooden toys. And I know I can hear her clearly. I know I understand what she's saying. I just don't hear it. And that can be very difficult, I think, for people who aren't neurodivergent to kind of understand that's basically a side effect. There's just too much else going on. And it's not like I haven't been listening or I can't hear you. It's just my brain hasn't just there's too much my brain's processing it at the one time.
This is Nelly again. I love what I just heard about it's not going to go away, and that there's this huge aspect of the social and emotional piece. One thing about if you get very upset and you just, as you said, that stopgap or something comes out, something just sort of springs out, that people who are neurotypical might just think you're mean, or that you're moody, or whatever they would think. But our brain with rejection sensitivity might perseverate on that, of like, oh, how would I make that up to them? And they're going to think of me in this way. And you've already had the conversation that they've had with you in your head, and you're so many steps ahead of that. But I also want to honor hearing that there could be a constant, and that constant form of stress, that constant could be sound, that constant could be pain, that constant could be health. And, it's such an invisible stimulus, that to think that you're building on top of that already, and you're also trying to work yourself in this room, in this world, on this task. And there could be swirling gears and cogs that are going on that are really iceberg, so below the surface that I feel liberated to hear, hey, by the way, when I'm being kinder to myself, I want people to know that I'm not just, I'm grand, and you just have to understand me and deal with the world. I'm being kind to myself because my default is to think of how wrong I am and how non-functional my way is. So being kinder to myself isn't saying like, I'm right, you're wrong. It's saying, I'm going to think about how I just blew up at you much more than you're going to think about how I blew up at you. If that makes sense, that I'm going to think about being unkind to a child or like, overwhelmed in that moment, when really it's desperately calling out to be like, I almost had that thing and I lost that thing, as Austin had said, like, and you can't even say what that thing is. And that thing might emerge a week later. And it isn't synchronous. It isn't logical. It isn't in sequence. So understanding that it's this swirl of loops, or, I mean, even that seems too systematic to be explained. But hearing what you're saying makes me feel understood. So that's a good thing to remember as well. It's really great to hear, hey, by the way, we do this. And there are techniques that work for different people. Like some people are much more physical, and you can reset the brain by crossing the meridian, the middle line, right? Like, just like swirling your hands over your nose in opposite directions can reset the brain for some people. Having hot tea and ice cream, like one sip of tea and one thing of ice cream, and like you had those opposites and suddenly you're on a reset. So it can't be a catch-all for everybody, but it's just that I'm going to keep trying. That's I know that stuckness is another default and another place that will make me give up on some of these tasks that have brought me pleasure in the past, right? It's called ahedonia, where you stop having like lust for the things you used to love, and that can happen as a result of sensory overload. And you can be really resentful to the things that you loved and the music that you loved and the things when they stop working as your reset. So that's how I'm going to like kind of think about my sensory overload. Like after this podcast is like, okay, well, it worked to take a decongestion that time, but that doesn't mean that that's my routine or go-to. It's just that I'm going to seek something out, and and that could be a better routine or go-to, because if it fails, then that's all or nothing in my ADHD brain. And I have to like be, my consciousness of that is going to make me try. And the willingness to try is going to get me motivated. And the getting me motivated is going to keep me from maybe like just have a shorter recovery time on my stuckness.
Yeah.
I love what you're saying there. Oh, Austin, go on.
No, I was just going to say that it's the thing of that all or nothing, just doing that one thing over and over again. Oh, I know this works. I'm just going to do it. And then to the point where when it fails, because it most likely will, that you're then left with, oh, great, I've got nothing else to fall back on. Whereas that kind of curiosity of trying different things. And again, I guess trying to be conscious of the different things that work in different situations, in different environments, in different spaces. So whether you're at home, at work, out in a shop, like even shopping can be like just going to a grocery store. If it's the wrong time of day, it's absolutely rammed with people, and you're suddenly really conscious of, like, again, I mostly have to shop with headphones in so that I just cannot hear everything else around me. I can just hear some nice music, and I can just focus in what I'm supposed to be buying, as opposed to getting distracted by all the bright, shiny things that you don't really need. And having kind of those different tools that work at different times, to be able to deal with those situations and not get to the point where it's too much, even though that's probably going to be inevitable in some situations. Like I used to cycle a lot, and it's something as basic as having my bike easily accessible. Where I used to live, it was like 20 10 feet from the house, easily accessible. I could just go and jump on my bike and cycle around, and it was really easy. Where I live now, my bike is like 40 feet from the house, and the door into the shed is just a bit of a difficult door. That simple barrier is enough to keep me off my bike, which is ludicrous. It is nuts that is enough, but it is enough. So the effort, because it's so funny to have to try and describe this. I know that cycling is great. I love cycling. I've cycled most of my life. I love getting on my bike. There's great freedom. Like we were saying, it gets the blood pumping. You're in a different environment. The just seeing trees and being outside in the world is great, especially for neurodivergence, because you're totally resetting your environment, right? But the blockers, the things that get in my way, are the fact that my bike is just a little bit too far out of reach. That it's that object permanence thing. It's the out of sight, out of mind thing. And then the fact that the door is just a little bit too difficult to open. It's so stupid. That shouldn't be a blocker, but it is. And I know if I got my bike more during the week, that I think I would kind of be more grounded in my environment here, and things wouldn't, especially because you can just jump on a bike for 10 minutes. It doesn't even have to be, it doesn't have to be for very long. But in my head, getting onto my bike and going out for 10 minutes, that's an hour for some reason in my head. I don't know why. It's not an hour. It's 10 minutes. But I know once I get past that and I have some kind of routine with it, that I'm like, oh, this is actually super easy. It will be something that I can use at a point where I know I don't, I need to get out of the house. There's too much noise going on. I just need to tell my wife, I'm just going for a bike ride for 10 minutes. And I'll be right back. And I know that will help. But I still haven't got to that point where I've made it easy for myself.
I completely get what you're saying. I don't touch one of my clothes wardrobes because the door is hard to open on it. So like literally the similar thing. And I know that if I decluttered, I'd feel so much better. And maybe I could put some new stuff in there, and like it'd be a little space for me to, it's actually quite a big wardrobe, so I could maybe even fit a desk there. But anyway, completely get it. It's like we know the things that's going to make us feel better. For me, it would be going outside as well. I always feel better about 2 minutes out when I'm out the door. But it's just in the moment, it just feels impossible because there's that little thing, like maybe my shoes are in the shoe box instead of just waiting there for me. And I'm like, oh, that's just going to overwhelm me. And I don't know why, but that's actually one thing I haven't figured out. But it's always going to be there. It's just little barrier blockages and time blindness, object permanence and stuff, all that put together. And it just makes you kind of forget, if I shower, I'm going to feel better. If I go outside, I'm going to feel better. If I get up early, I'm going to feel better. Like, that logically, but in the moment, it just feels there's too many barriers in the way. I don't know if that's the right word for it. But yeah, barriers. And also what we were saying about like prolonging periods of like feeling better between either sensory overload or overwhelm. Like it's inevitable, like you guys were saying, but it's going to happen. We're going to like experience this, and this is one of the really, really difficult things, obviously, which is why we're doing a podcast episode on it. It's not curable, it's not fixable, but prolonging the episodes really resonated with me. I'm actually I'm quite open about it, but I'm currently staying part-time in psychiatric hospital. And one of the things that put me in there was overwhelm, chronic overwhelm and sensory overload, which made me give up on a lot of things in my life that I genuinely cared about. It's like they're not working for me right now, so I'm just going to give them up. And that was something really, really tough to have to give up on, because the inner critic and everything, it makes me feel like I'm not good enough, and I've given up on another thing, given up on another hobby even, which was work, things I worked really hard for. But anyway, so I ended up in psychiatric hospital. I've been there for 3 months, hence not doing a podcast for a while, and now I'm home on weekends so I can do this. But prolonging the episodes between things, sometimes they're going to be inevitable. One of the things that I know alongside my ADHD coexisting is mental health issues. I know from research or from even talking to a lot of my friends who have ADHD, coexisting mental health issues, that they're common enough. I'm not going to paint everyone with one brush, but they can be. And that's one thing that I know I'm going to struggle with for my whole life. And like Nelly said, it's about being kinder to ourselves, because I'm not going to be able to get rid of that. But prolonging the time between each sense of overwhelm is something I'm hoping to have to do. I'm not going to say I'm never going to end up in hospital again, or I'm not going to say I'm never going to get chronically overwhelmed again. But it, the little barriers and stuff are always going to be there. The little things that stop me from doing the things that are good for me in a way are always going to be there. But I think a huge part of, getting used to, in a sense, having to have these periods in our lives is being kinder to ourselves, and kind of laughing about it, being like, oh, there's a barrier that's going to stop me getting out today. That sucks. What can I do to put things in place to help me? I don't know about you, Austin, but have you thought about moving your bike closer to the house, if there's any chance you could do that?
Well, so I could, in theory. The thing that's holding it, so I live on a farm, and the sheds that are next to the house, again, this kind of doesn't sound, it does sound ludicrous. The doors are just difficult doors. A couple of them are big, heavy metal doors. I want to replace them to make it easy, because they need replacing anyway, to make it easier. And the door on the shed where the bike is the furthest shed away. But the wood's so rotten that the frame just came off yesterday, and so I can't really open the door. It's even more difficult to open the door now. And I know I'll just fix it. All I need to do for that is just go get some wood, right? So this is the next thing. You just jump straight onto, right, the fix for me to be able to exercise is I need to make a door, which to most people, that doesn't sound logical whatsoever. But in my head, no, that's the logic of it. I need to make a door to make the access to my bike really easy. But to make a door, I've got to go get wood. I can't do that during a weekend because the place I get wood from isn't open. I have to do that during the week. I work during the week, so when am I going to do it? So it just gets put off until I can find a day where I've been able to take the day off work or something. So there's a whole process. And again, yeah, I probably could move the bike closer to the house. But even then, yeah, it is that thing. I think if there was a couple of weekends in a row where I was just able to get on my bike and go out for 10 minutes, that would probably be enough for the kind of the change in mindset of, actually, this is actually quite easy to do. And it's just getting to that point.
Maybe this is self-identifying too much. This is Nelly again, sorry. But to actually, my relationship to motivation might be that I prefer that there's something that I'm kicking against instead of something that is solved, right? Like, oh, it would only take those kinds. It takes a lot for me to actually move toward the fix. Right. Like there are some, though I will go along for an extended period of like incredible discipline. In the past few years, when we had this time that we were trying to make our own schedules or make our own time, I was meditating 40 minutes a day. I was doing yoga 5 times a week. I was doing exercise. The sense of achievement was just, I was out of control. They were calling me up from the local radio station being like, this person's like killing it in the pandemic. And it was like, yay, like so hyper, so above and beyond. And then you just stop meditating one day, or you just stop doing sit-ups, and like it doesn't exist anymore for me. And how many steps it would take if there is that overwhelm of like just needing a door, and it is on a weekend, and there might be like the social thing, like you mentioned, you have small children. Well, maybe they have training or matches or something fun, and like you can't prioritize yourself and your exercise, and like my mind will just layer all sorts of reasons why it might be selfish for me to be moving toward the good, or it might be fatalistic. Like there is no hope in me getting a door. And so not only do I not deserve to have something nicer, but I I'm good. I'm good for right now. I'll just pass on that. And so like maybe that is self-identifying my own like the way that my brain works, but it takes a lot of success and mental flexibility to start the right actions. I've mentioned this Mitch Hedberger quote before, that he said that it is as hard to start flossing your teeth as to quit smoking cigarettes. Like building a positive action is as hard, if not harder, for somebody who doesn't have natural structure or like the same kinds of motivation. And the same kind of balance about things. So for me, in your scenario, the Lauren asking, have you thought about it? It's like, oh, I've thought about that. And I buried that in the backyard long ago, right? That's.
Yeah, it was meant to be a joke, guys. Sorry. Because I was like, yes, Barry is in place. And I was like, have you thought about that? But yeah, no, completely. There's always going to be those things. And it completely puts me off anyway. Like if there's just little things in place, I'm like, I could, but I actually can't. That sounds so silly, but like I could do these things. I could clean out the wardrobe. I could put my little desk in there and make it a me space. And I know it'd be great. I know it could work, but I can't. And like, I don't know about you guys, but the stuckness is real with that. Like it's just
Okay, so sorry, just on the wardrobe and your clothes. So I had this kind of a similar thing for ages. So the wardrobe I have right now is actually quite. I say it's quite small. It's probably a bit smaller than average. It's not massive, right? And I got to the point where I'm like, oh, it's like everything I've got hung up, like tops and shirts and stuff, it's full. And I actually just got a new shirt from a store, right? So I then went, oh, well, where's this going to go? I can't just. I need more. And then again, that stuckness of, well, I'll just chuck it underneath everything, and then the mess builds up. And then I just kind of had a realization. I was like, there's only so many shirts I actually need. If there's a shirt I haven't worn for a while, I'm just going to get rid of it. I'm going to make space for the new thing. And then I did that with everything. And suddenly I had a big clear out and I made space. And I thought, right, I know I can buy 2 or 3 more shirts in the next few months. And then the wardrobe will be full. And then I might not need to buy anything again. So then if I went to a store again, I said, oh, I actually quite like that shirt. I would think in my head, right, what do I need to get rid of to get this shirt then? So that then the space itself could become easier for me to then get access to the clothes. Because that was part of the reason I was kind of just wearing the same stuff over and over again, is that it was harder to find the things I actually wanted to wear because there was just too much stuff. So then when I cut all that down, I was like, right. And then, I did the thing. I organized my shirts by short sleeve, long sleeve, check, plain. And so I could then see everything as it was. And I would just pick one up and wear it. And then the next day I'd pick the next one up in the row and wear it. And it just made, like, it took the effort out of getting dressed. And the same with like jeans. I just have a stack of a few jeans and I start at the top and work my way down. And that was it. And it was suddenly like, I don't have to think about this now. Bye-bye. The burden of getting dressed in the morning disappeared. And now, like for work, to be an even better routine, I get out my clothes the night before. And that was like a game changer, getting all my stuff ready the night before work. So if I slept in, it didn't matter. I could leave the house in 10 minutes. But again, it was just like, it's that light bulb moment where you suddenly go, actually, this isn't actually that difficult. And it's just finding that situation, like what led to that situation was many years of frustration. Not like a few months or a few weeks, or even anybody telling me this is, have you not just tried doing this? There was nobody, nobody would come into my bedroom. My wife wasn't going to say anything. It just became something for myself that I became more and more aware of, that I got more and more frustrated with, that I decided I want to do something about this. What am I going to do? And whatever worked for me, it's now worked. And so I think whatever might work for you, if you want to put a desk in it because actually a desk could be useful, then if you get to the point of putting a desk in, the clothes thing might also sort itself out at the same time. And maybe the doors as well, making the doors easier to open. And once those little things have been ticked off, that'll be it. it'll be like, oh, this is never a problem to begin with.
Yeah, you're entirely right. It's just, when am I going to get around to it? And then am I going to clutter it all again? And then is the door going to go badly again? And then that's my brain right now. But yeah, no, you're entirely right. I'm going to give it a go. I have the motivation now. It's just whether it's going to stay like that.
I mean, I have my background blurred out because behind me is utter chaos right now. 2 weeks ago, it was spotless, and now the office has become a dumping ground again for just stuff. Like, I don't even know where this stuff even comes from.
It's like the junk drawer. I have a junk drawer. I think, do you guys have a junk drawer where it's just got like buttons, screwdrivers, sunglasses?
Batteries.
Yeah, one of my favorite things I've ever done is made a little section for my batteries over the thing over there. Anyway, Nelly, sorry, you were gonna say.
My favorite color is shiny, and I'm like a magpie. Yeah, I understand totally. But I just wanted to mention how Austin has said before that space is really your superpower, or spatial intelligence, or thinking about your relationship to these kinds of things. And I was thinking how amazing people with ADHD are as being life coaches, or being able to see things in ways that other people can't. And so just to say, oh, right, you've mentioned before your spatial intelligence, or you're wanting to cook, or you're seeing something, and then what I heard you just say is then it all falls into place, and it's a different thing. It's as if you said, it's as if the problem weren't even there in the first place. It is so marvelously taken care of. And I wasn't saying anything against you, Lauren, to say, oh, have you ever thought about, I got the joke of it as well, but I also got how tremendously helpful it can be for someone with ADHD to coach another person with ADHD, or to be coached by somebody who understands that maybe it's not the same process. Maybe it's not the like one drawer, or hoovering the apartment, or whatever it is, but it is something where we can go from zero to overwhelm. You had said, hey, what are the triggers? The triggers could be different because the sequence of the problem had already been taken care of, or it festers and it works itself out, and it's not going to be life defining. That's what I mean about being kind about the narrative. And you know, they say of the weather here, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, right? That everything, every storm, every feeling is going to pass, and that there are tools that will work for me. And just even recognizing that they're not always going to work all of the time means that I'm, again, another Whitman quote, I'm vast, I contain multitudes. Do I contradict myself? I am so huge. I have so many things going on. I'm brushing my teeth. I'm thinking about these things. I'm singing this song. I am capable of seeing how you can get through this, and how you can get through this, and how maybe when I see what you're doing, it gets a little easier on me because I'm understood. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's definitely that thing of it, the weather. That's a perfect analogy. You can be in a storm and be like, great, this is it now. It's always going to be this way. The skies are always going to be dark. It's always going to be raining. Well, and that's not true. You know, there's always sunshine after the rain. There is, the weather will change. You're not going to be stuck in that spot all the time. You're just not. Something will happen. Somebody will give you a call. Something will come on the TV. You'll suddenly get hungry for something. You'll change the environment. Something will change. And I think part of it is just making sure that you're open to them moving with that change. Yeah,
guys, that was beautiful. The ending of this was just so gorgeous. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, to kind of bring it into the real world context of, and it's the end of that apology. That's what it is. You can be emotionally overwhelmed, and everything around the world, you know, the noise, everything's turned to full volume, and you can't really hear anything, and you have an outburst, and then, you know, you have to calm down, refocus on whatever it is you were doing, and then at some point apologize. And after that kind of apology, even if you don't feel like you should have, like you kind of, you know that it's not something that the other person was asking for at all. And even if they understand that you get emotionally overwhelmed, it's still not easy for the other person to be in a place where they can just take an emotional outburst. And it's after that apology, the tension, everything changes, it dissipates. You know, it's like it's like the being at the sea. I don't know if you ever been at the sea, at a beach, and you see the waves are crashing against the rocks because it's really windy, and suddenly the wind calms down and you just get the nice gentle lapping waves and everything just kind of settles down and you feel calm in yourself. Everything else around you feels kind of back to normal, and you can then get on with your day. And that's what it is. That's what an apology does. That's what, not just the other person, you know, the being kind to yourself and remembering that isn't your complete all state of being. That's the hope at the end of it.
Thank you so much, guys. That was so uplifting, and you're so incredibly right. It's going to come to a breaking point like that, and then it settles a bit, and that's where we need to be kinder to ourselves, because although we may try so hard not to have these outbursts or maybe overwhelm or whatever it is we're experiencing, it's going to be a symptom, and we can try like so hard not to get irritable, not to, you know, do anything wrong. And like Nelly said, our brain is going to be given out to us anyway, even when we do these things. So it's hard to say sorry to someone and then to take all the guilt on because we're already beating ourselves up. But yeah, no, it's about hope, resilience, and kindness a lot of the time, and just the hope more so to believe that it's going to settle a little bit, and in that we're going to think a bit more objectively about the situation, learn somewhat, be like, okay, next time I'm going to try not to maybe say those things I said, or, you know, be so quick to jump down someone's throat, or, you know, for me it would definitely be like that anyway. But it is good. It's having the faith in the fact that it will settle. We're not going to be stuck in the overwhelm for the rest of our lives, and that's really hard to see in the moment, 100%. Because the panic sets in, you're like, this is my default now, I'm just going to be like this. But yeah, no, it's about the hope. So that was gorgeous, guys. Thank you. Does anyone have anything else to add before we finish up? I'm conscious this is going to run out at 6:30.
No, I mean, I think we could probably keep talking about this all night.
Right, yeah.
I'm so grateful for this forum. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you so much, Lauren, and Austin as well.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening to Let's Chat, ADHD Ireland's first podcast hosted by me, Lauren McBride. You can find us on Instagram at ADHD Ireland, and I'm on there too, at Her Thoughts in Bright Colours. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we'd love to hear your feedback and opinions on the topics covered each week. Sending positive vibes until we chat again.